Tonight, it's Gladiator, again! Allegedly the original working title for the sequel. Look at that. Steady as a rock. Welcome to an ambivalent Macclevoid at the movies. No. No, nothing. And Edward Gibbons, in his Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, wrote, Chapter II, Movie the Second. And so it was in the year MMXXIV that Ridley Scott did decide to sequelize his movie of MM, known as Gladiator. And the plot concerned the child of Russell Crowe, 16 years after Russell Crowe's death. A child we learn was in the original movie, the child Lucien, who was subsequently placed into exile by his mother, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, except to say that for some reason 2 gay men have assumed the emperorship of Rome, and they are bad. Lucien somehow makes it all the way to Africa, where he grows up in a Namibian city, and meets the love of his life, a woman. He grows to be big and strong on account of that old movie trope of royal exceptionalism. That is to say, he is blue-blooded, he is from the royal line, and consequently, being a Roman prince by birth, he cannot help be stronger and more virile and more brutal than his African brethren. Some implicit racism there, I think, but, you know, this is Rome, an empire built on slaves, so what can you do? Act I think that's Act 1. The Namibians are attacked by a fleet of Roman ships. They sack the city, and the general, who will subsequently be known as Pedro Pascal, in the midst of the fighting, orders the wife of said Lucius to be murdered, and she duly is murdered. Thus, Lucius has a terrible grievance, which he nurses a rage, as Denzel Washington, peace be upon him, will later point out. He is enslaved, taken back to Rome, and there follows much the same trajectory as Russell Crowe's character in the first movie, becoming a gladiator. He's involved in a series of bloody battles, but instead of being bought and trained by the late Oliver Reed, who is dead and has been dead since halfway through the shoot of the first movie, he is instead recruited by Denzel Washington. And Denzel Washington is actually a former slave who has become a free man, and indeed a highly influential person in the Roman court, and intends to ultimately assume the position of emperor. But that's for Act 3, it says here. So during the course of the movie, Paul Mescaline, the new gladiator, meets his old mother, learns who he is, and decides that he too must be involved in liberating Rome from the evil two emperors who are implicitly homosexual, and kill Denzel Washington. That can't be right. Gladiatorial battles, blah blah, sharks, blah blah, mutant baboons, question mark, armies of the north, coup d'etat, Derek Jacobi, the end. Gladiator 2, or Gladiator II, if you're playing along at home. It's been a long time, hasn't it, since the original Gladiator. Someone really should tell Ridley Scott that, you know, due to sort of the magic of the movies, you don't actually have to wait 20 years to make the sequel. You just cast somebody who's older. Really, I mean, there's no need to wait a quarter of a century. The moment's passed. Are we excited about Gladiator? You know, if this was 2002, we'd be queuing around the block to see it, wouldn't we? Well, you would. But it's not MMII, it's MMXXIV, and consequently, it's all a bit meaningless. But we'll loop back to its redundancy at the very end of this review. Spoiler. So, Paul Mescaline, the Russell Crowe replacement, the son of Crowe, looks like a Roman statue, which is terrific casting. But he's also got the same charisma and personality as a Roman statue. There is a little bit more going. He's not a total stiff. There is a little bit more going on with this guy. He does have a presence. He's got a certain brute physicality. One can understand why he was cast, both for that reason and the fact that he looks like a Roman statue. But for a movie like this, particularly a movie as long as this, 2.5 hours, you really need a rousing, dynamic personality to really get you going, you know? And he ain't it. It's okay to watch. It doesn't fill the screen quite the way as Denzel Washington fills the screen, you know? I don't know. Maybe that's Denzel's theatre training, as he would say. He believes, you see, that actors who have theatrical training are inherently superior to those who don't. Maybe. But then how do you explain Ricky Tomlinson? So, the courtly machinations, if you will, that fill the Act II of the movie are designed to fill it out. And if you're a sort of I, Claudius type person, or even an Up Pompeii kind of person, you'll probably enjoy all of this whispering, you know, I have a secret, I wish to depose the emperors, there's a bit of a coup going on kind of stuff. But listen, this movie, Ridley Scott's not really interested in this. This is just a bridge between the huge battle at the beginning and the bloody Colosseum violence at the end. And he only skims the surface. There's never any attempt to really get into the depth of it, into the meat of that psychodrama. And there is a lot of psychodrama in this movie. You know, you have some intriguing plot threads, which Scott's only really quite reticent to pull them. For example, Pedro Pascal's general that sacks his city and kills his wife is actually really just a proud patriot who is being forced to go on these campaigns by the evil emperor brothers. And he doesn't really like it. He doesn't like sacrificing his men. He didn't have much choice but to kill Paul Mescalin's wife. After all, she was very successful at killing his men. So that's interesting, isn't it? That's nice to have a Roman general who's really a good guy and would prefer not to be fighting. And doesn't want to go on to Persia and India and all those other places. He would just rather stay at home with his wife. You know, he doesn't want to fight anymore. But he killed Paul Mescalin's wife, and that's why he is the target of his rage. That's why he is the one that Paul Mescalin's determined to kill. It's a complication, isn't it? It's something a little more complex than the original movies. You know, clear cut villainy of Lee Phoenix and Russell Crowe's reasons for wanting him dead. And then also you add into the mix the guy who bought him, Denzel Washington, and his imperial ambitions have become more explicit as the movie progresses. You know, a gladiator wrangler with ambitions to be emperor. That's interesting, isn't it? So these are fascinating dynamics, but Ridley Scott doesn't really go there. I mean, he tells the story, he joins the dots, and it's all done in his usual stylized, beatific way, and it's lovely to look at, and the digital sets are fantastic. Oh, how we used to marvel over them. Do you remember in the year MM when we used to say things like, it's incredible how you can create Rome, you know, out of a partial set and fill the rest in with it. Well, these days we don't care about any of that. But it still looks good. So, the psychodrama goes through its paces. It's not quite enough to hold our attention. The middle of this movie sags, just like the middle of this review is sagging. You're beginning to wonder when it's going to end, aren't you? You're thinking, goodness me, you must be close to the end now. Well, I am, actually. Maybe I'm doing this in a sort of, I don't know, meta kind of way, you know. There's a sort of metatextual attempt at mirroring the trajectory of the movie by creating a review that is the same. Starts off with a bit of a gimmick, bit of a flourish. Dips in the middle, partially recovers at the end. You have to wait and see, won't you? The problem is that Gladiator II is derivative. Both of sword and sandal epics generally, but particularly of the first movie. There are lots of visual echoes and plot echoes from the first film. And occasionally Ridley tries to sustain our attention by throwing in some batshit crazy and high camp elements like killer sharks, mutant baboons, the odd line delivery, which is very Frankie Howard. You know, you do half expect him to leap out in some scenes and go, nay, nay, and thrice nay. Be nice to Frankie. And that would have been intellectually honest, I think, because Gladiator II is very silly in places. Imagine, you know, up Pompeii with additional sadistic violence. Quite a spectacle. So, ultimately, and this is the end now, we have to contemplate the fact that although it's sporadically entertaining, visually very lavish, and it's performed with a certain gusto, and it's got a very, very, you know, pulsating, heart-pounding score, Gladiator II is redundant. There's nothing here to justify the 24-year wait. There's nothing to make you think, goodness me, this absolutely should have been made. Why wasn't it made earlier? It should have been made earlier, but as cash grabs go, as redundant sequels go, it's fine. But, you know, and I know this isn't going to be a terribly controversial observation, might be a good idea if Hollywood did start to think about doing something new. And yes, I know, swords and sandal epics aren't new. It was a revival of the genre when Scott did it 24 years ago. Now it's just a nostalgic legacy sequel of a throwback that throws back to a throwback. But come on, Ridley. You know, if you are going to go down the nostalgia route, let's have the Alien Covenant sequel, please. No more of this. Gladiator 2 is Certificate 15 for Paul Mescalin, excessive Derek Jacobi, and not using a CGI Oliver Reed as the basis for the entire cast.
A woman will never, ever forgive a man that he fucks her. She is the receiver.
Never forgives him if he doesn't.
I'll buy that, sir. I'll buy that. So we walk in every plank, in every regiment, in every corps, in everything. That you are the receivers. You take our seed, you look after our babies, and we'll go do the hunting for you.
I don't believe in the death
I like that very
but
much.
I can see that there is a strong public argument on that.
There is, and there's a passionate public
Excuse me,
feeling about the death
do I
penalty
have to,
everywhere.
am I expected to?
No, of course you're not expected to put up with that. Oliver, please. Please. It's clearly upset Kate.
I'm very sorry. Very sorry. Just had a sash came over here. That's what I was.
Sorry, but I mean, that's
Of course,
aggressive, it's obnoxious.
I know, of
Is
course
that
it is.
something you want to visit upon someone you've invited to your program?
I think it is unacceptable.
Oliver,
I
you've
think
been a
Oliver-
bore.
Sorry.
You've been a bore, and you know you have.
Sorry.
Right.
Do you live in the Thorough?
No, he doesn't.
Do you want me to go?
No. I'd love it if you would. I think you're an awful bully. And I think it's appalling that anybody should have to put up with it.
Do you want me to go?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
Gentlemen,
I think you should go.
I think that's
I do.
the collective
Consensus.
opinion.
Good night.
good night, gentlemen. Good ladies. Good night.
Good night.
Until next time, I'm Dr. Macclevoid. It's not my real name, nor is, you know, Biggus Dickus or Epididymus Maximus, whatever you've heard. Hail Caesar.